Chapter 8. The Psychology Boomers. Psychology boomers include all the boomers that directly or indirectly made their money off of psychology. This includes psychologists themselves, therapists, guidance counselors, social workers, and even the pharmaceutical industry. Like social scientists thought they had all of society figured out, psychology boomers thought they had something of equal complexity figured out: the human mind. And if the mental health of millennials is any indication, psychology boomers experience the same level of success as their social scientist colleagues. The career path of psychology boomers paralleled very closely to that of teacher boomers. They usually started out as lazy 17-year-olds who wanted to avoid hard work, math, or toil at any costs. They claimed they were people persons, or they wanted to help people, but that was just code for I don't want to do math. Like teachers, they were also arrogant enough to think that at 17, they were adequately wise and experienced to consult people about their mental health. And so, just like teachers who never set foot in the real world yet insisted on teaching our youth, psychology boomers had no problems putting the mental health of millions of individuals into their then wise, sage, 25-year-old hands. But the real problem with psychology boomers is that their profession is more or less complete bunk. It just plain doesn't work. And acting like it does causes more damage than good, sometimes spectacularly so. This isn't to say having a good independent third party in the form of a therapist to provide an unbiased opinion about you or your mental health isn't helpful or even necessary. Nor is it to say genuine mental illnesses don't exist and some progress towards curing those illnesses hasn't been made. But psychology isn't a pure empirical science like neurology or neurochemistry. It doesn't stand up to the scientific method, giving it great room for error and thus damage. It's just one step above astrology or witchcraft, and there's a myriad of ways to see this. The most obvious of ways to tell is that psychology just plain doesn't work. Society's mental health is getting worse, not better. And this is in light of a lot of legitimate advances in neurochemistry, pharmacology, and neurology. Further damning the psychology profession is that the millennials have the worst mental health of any generation, yet receive the most therapy and psychotherapeutic drugs for their age. By all measures and accounts, the millennials should have the mental stability of Ward Cleaver and serenity of a Buddhist monk. But they're in the worst mental shape of any generation, making a compelling argument that, like social sciences, the psychology industry actually harms society instead of helps. Another way to tell psychology is fraudulent is to look at the repeatability of their studies. The American Association for the Advancement of Science tried to replicate the results of 100 psychological studies since 2008. The results were telling. Only a third of the study's original results could be repeated, meaning 66% of the studies were rubbish. If open-heart surgery only had a 33% success rate, you'd immediately cease the practice. But with psychology, you're going to bat with a 33% success rate, and on something as minor as your mental health. There's also the mental health of the mental health professionals themselves. You might have heard the old stereotype that people who study psychology are messed up people who are trying to figure themselves out. But if you ever dated a social worker, a psychologist, a psych major, or a counselor, you'll find out right quick it's a stereotype for a reason. Because it's true. Psychological professionals are messed up. Through various studies and surveys, you'll find that 2/3 of female psychologists and 1/3 of male psychologists report being physically and sexually abused as children. Shrinks experience a divorce rate 50% higher than the population. Female psychologists attempt suicide at 3 times the rate of their non-psychologist counterparts. And the psychology grad student population is a petri dish of mental illness, chock full of depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts, though this polling data was conducted on millennial grad students. You might as well consult Willy Wonka about good dental practices if you're going to consult a psychologist about your mental health. Finally, if you still think there's some validity or merit to psychology as a functional science, just take any high school or college Psych 101 class and you'll quickly realize it's complete BS. Perhaps when you were younger and forced to take these classes, you might have naively thought, well, I don't see how this is concrete or a really provable science. There seems to be a lot of speculation and theory about cognitive, behavioral, and psychoanalysis and no hard science. Matter of fact, should we even be tinkering with the human mind if we don't know what we're doing? Oh well, he's a professor and has a doctorate, and I'm just a dumb 18-year-old kid. They're boomers, they're my elders. They're always right. I'll just believe psychology is legitimate science. But now that you're older and the veneer of a college campus or lecture hall is gone, you can look at psychology and all its underlying schools of thought and judge them for what they are. Theories, speculation, ideas. And since, after 100 years, they're still theories instead of provable and repeatable laws, you can write off psychology for the witchcraft and astrology it is. You would think with such a joke of a profession, and a profession that costs society billions with no tangible results, we might end it like the horse and buggy. But we don't. And the reason why is there's just too much damn money to be made, and easy money at that. Worse, psychology also provides a lot of people within society excuses, forgiveness, and absolution from the responsibility for their own actions. And so there is a great and many reasons the psychology industry continues today. As with the social sciences, a lot of psychology boomers are just looking for a government handout. Psychology professors, social workers, guidance counselors, special ed teachers, all of these psychology boomers need to keep up the facade of psychology being a legitimate profession, otherwise their government job or funding goes away. Worse, this gives these psychology boomers every incentive to overdiagnose society with mental illnesses, and either create or discover completely new mental illnesses as it will generate more money and funding. Thus, nearly every 8-year-old millennial boy was diagnosed with ADHD. Special education, which didn't exist 20 years ago, has exponentially grown to be one of the largest single expense items in school budgets. And if there's a death at a school, they cannot wait to rush therapists to the crime scene, to vulture off the kids that might actually be suffering. There is also a forgiveness or indulgence aspect to psychology. If you do something wrong or make a horrific decision, you only have yourself to blame. But if you have a mental illness, it conveniently no longer becomes your fault. It's not your fault you did LSD and ran over the neighbor's dog with your car. You're an addict. You have a mental illness. It's not your fault you're a lazy bum who didn't study and are now flunking out of Pip Johnson's remedial community college for flunkies. No, you suffer from dyslexia and social anxiety disorder and need a government scholarship. It's not your fault you can't teach to save your life. Your students all suffer from ADHD and need to be doped up on Ritalin. And it absolutely is not your fault you didn't stay home to raise your kid, who is now torturing animals during recess, leaving headless squirrels in girls' desks, merely as a detouring hobby before he goes full incel and shoots up his school. Your kid suffers from Asperger's or autism. You are a great parent, who is also brave and courageous for having a mentally impaired son. This indulgence forgiveness aspect of the psychology industry is where the real money is made, and is the true purpose of the profession. It is also why the psychology industry, no matter how bogus, will never go away. Americans are too prideful to ever admit they were wrong, take responsibility for their actions, and will pay lots of money to protect their egos. They want a guilt-free, responsibility-free life where they can do whatever they want, and if things go wrong, they simply chalk it up to mental illness. But as it always is when it comes to boomers and their deal with the devil contracts, there is a price to pay. And when it comes to psychology boomers, it's believing you're mentally ill, when in fact you're not. It's already difficult enough if you have a legitimate mental illness. If you truly are depressed, you truly are contemplating suicide, or you suffer a genuine chemical imbalance in your brain, these are horrible things that really lessen your life. But to fake having a mental illness? Or to lie to yourself about having one? Or to lie to your children that they have one? Isn't that worse than actually having a mental illness? And how much effort and energy do you have to commit over the course of your life to keep that facade up? What does it cost you over a lifetime to fake such a thing just to protect your pride? The problem with the psychology boomers is they're all too eager to accommodate you in this delusion. Not only because they will gladly take your money, but because if you're willing to keep the facade up, they are too, because it's a lifetime stream of income for them. This also means they have no financial incentive to cure you of mental illness because it would mean the well would run dry. They need to indulge you in this delusion forever, so they can make money on you forever. And if you're a particularly weak-minded person, you need to keep up the delusion as well. Because, let's be honest, if you ever grew a pair and admitted you didn't have a mental illness and just plain suck, you'd have to suffer a mighty blow to your ego. And so, what most psychological services really boil down to is a long-term, even lifetime, ego protection service you pay for so you don't have to take responsibility for your bad decisions and can protect your precious self-esteem forever. But what's even worse than faking a mental illness is being told you have one when you don't. You don't even have the ego or arrogance to fake a mental illness and are a perfectly mentally healthy individual. But what if people lie to you and tell you you're mentally ill? And what if they do this to you not when you're an adult, but when you're an innocent child? Unfortunately, there is a cadre of boomers who have every incentive to lie to people, specifically children, as it symbiotically benefits them and the psychology boomers. And tragically, this cadre is composed of people who should be the protectors of children, not parasites, teachers and parents. Teachers who can't teach dismiss their inability to teach on the mental illness of their students. And parents who can't parent do the same to their kids. And instead of the psychology boomers taking a stand, having some morals, and telling the teachers to teach and the parents to parent, they are more than happy to have some Benjamins slapped in their hands to bogusly diagnose those kids with a mental disorder those kids don't have. The kid is perfectly fine. But the teacher's ego and the parent's pride are more important than the kid's mental health. And so, they have no problem lying to the kid, telling them they're mentally ill, which no doubt screws up the kid for the rest of his life. If you're already disgusted with the psychology boomers and the symbiotic parent-teacher parasites who feed innocent child victims to them, don't worry, it gets worse. Pharmaceuticals. Because it's already criminal to lie to a child or adult about them having a mental illness when they don't. It's tragic when teachers and parents love themselves more than the kids, so they lie to them about being mentally ill. But it goes into mad Nazi scientist experimenting on human test subjects level when you dope your kid up with mind-altering drugs because you're just too damn lazy to parent or teach. Of course, expecting the pharmaceutical industry to have a conscience is like expecting the banking industry to do the same. The pharmaceutical industry just makes too much damn money on treating legitimate mental illnesses, but a lot more on misdiagnosed, overdiagnosed, and completely bogus ones. And you can even forgive the pharmaceutical industry for making the drugs, as they're not the ones writing the prescriptions. They're just the ones banging them out. But the fact that mind-altering drugs were used as a substitute for parenting, teaching, or just raising a generation of children is unforgivable. And the fact that they were so widely used on disorders that likely didn't exist only made a bad situation worse, contributing to the mental suffering of the millennial generation. What is it like living through life thinking you have a mental illness when in fact you don't? Or worse, what's it like developing a genuine mental illness because you were lied to about having one when you didn't? And even worse than that, what's life like when you're taking a psychotropic drug you don't need? And quadruply worse than that is how do you deal with the fact that it was your own teachers, psychologists, and parents who were the ones that planted that knife in your back? There are a lot of reasons to hate the boomers. Psychology boomers are just another large, painful one.